Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Montreal, Canada on February 19th, 2026. Today, a war on Iran seems all but inevitable. In fact, it seems imminent. And I've thought a good deal in the days leading up to this moment about what I can and should say before this catastrophe befalls us. And after some reflection, I decided that there's really no point in my trying to persuade our degenerate politicians to refrain from this crime. Western leaders certainly don't give a damn about what I have to say, nor do they care, for that matter, about what you have to say in regard to this war. Not at this moment. At this moment, all indications are that their minds are made up. Now, with vigorous protests mounted over a period of weeks, we might have persuaded them to do the decent thing and not attack Iran again. But it's too late for that now. Nor would any purpose be served, in my view, by my offering to you my predictions about what is likely to unfold once the bombing begins. My predictions will not affect the ultimate course of this war one iota. So what would be gained by my telling you how I think it might unfold? There are, however, a couple of things that I can offer at this perilous moment. The first thing I can and should offer is an apology to the people of Iran. To my sisters and brothers in Iran, I apologize for the heinous crimes that our governments are about to commit against you. I apologize as well for my own personal failure to restrain these monsters and for the fact that we in Western society have empowered these monsters. For that, I humbly request your forgiveness. My heart and soul are with you now and with all of the indigenous peoples of West Asia. I have no doubt that the resistance will prevail, but I also know that the price of victory will be very steep indeed. If only those of us living in the West had as much courage and steadfastness as do the peoples of West Asia. I commit to you now that after you have ground the faces of these beasts into the dust, I'll do all I reasonably can do to hold them accountable for their savagery. And there's one other thing that I can offer at this pivotal moment, and here I'll address myself to our listeners in the West. To you, my brothers and sisters in the Western world, I say this: do not forget. First and foremost, do not forget that they lied us into this war. They lied about Iran's nuclear program, claiming that Iran was seeking to develop a nuclear arsenal when all evidence pointed to the contrary. They lied as well about Israel's nukes, claiming that it had none or remaining silent about its possession of nuclear weapons and its open threats to use them, and saying nothing about the fact that Israel is the only state in the Middle East not to have acceded to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means that its nuclear program has not been subjected to independent international inspections. They lied about who is the aggressor in this conflict, claiming all along that it was in Iran, when in fact, we have been exhibiting criminal aggression towards the Iranian people and the state of Iran for decades. We were aggressive towards Iran when the governments of the United States and Britain overthrew its democratically elected leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, in the 1950s, because it had the temerity to want to nationalize the Anglo-American oil company for the well-being of the Iranian people. They lied to us about the fact that they encouraged Saddam Hussein, whom they later called one of the most heinous dictators in the world, to attack Iran in a criminal war of aggression in the 1980s, and they lied about enabling him to use chemical weapons on the Iranian people. They lied about having a justification to murder Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, and other important Iranian and Iraqi officials at the end of Trump's first administration. They lied about the legality of Israel's brutal attack on the Iranian embassy in Damascus last year. And they lied, of course, about their purported concern for international and human law and human rights, both of which they have mercilessly violated with absolutely no compunction for decades, and particularly during the 2+ years of genocide we have witnessed in horror since October 2023. They lied to us as well about who the real terrorists are, claiming that Iran is one of the worst state sponsors of terrorism, with little to no evidence, even as the United States distinguished itself as the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the post-World War II history, and that by a wide margin. Of course, Israel, its rabid attack dog in West Asia, commits terrorism, including against children, on an almost daily basis, and has done so with a shocking degree of audacity. They lied about the nature of the riots in Iran, claiming that throughout they were legitimate and peaceful, when in fact they were co-opted after they were caused by a manufactured economic crisis in Iran by the West, co-opted by agents of the Mossad and the CIA, and turned into deadly riots targeting police, mosques, ambulances, buses, and other civilian facilities and infrastructure. They lied to us about the role that the Epstein scandal is playing in all of this, and how the daily revelations of depravity of the ruling elite in the West that have emerged since January 30th, when they published more than 3 million documents or pages from the Epstein files, how this has caused them to become desperate to bury the story and to distract us with their latest war of aggression. And they lied, last but not least, about their ultimate goal. They claimed it was Iran's nuclear program, then they shifted to Iran's ballistic missile program, and then they claimed it was about Iran's support for resistance groups in West Asia. In reality, it's not about any of that. It's not even about regime change. Regime change is the proximate goal. The ultimate goal, what they are ultimately trying to seek here, is the destruction and dismemberment of Iran, so that whoever might lead it in the future, they will not have the capacity to defend Iranian sovereignty and to resist the project of US-Israeli hegemony in the region. And every step of the way, the corporate media in the West have aided and abetted all of these lies and more. So to say it again, never forget that they lied us into this war. Do not forget also that their peace negotiations with Iran were a scam, kabuki theater, designed to do two things. First of all, to buy them time for a massive military buildup in West Asia, but secondly, to enable them to say with a straight face, once the shit hits the fan, that they did everything in their power to avoid this, when in fact it was their ultimate goal to cause it to happen. Do not forget as well that they had no reasonable basis to believe that they can win this war. How did they not learn that lesson in Vietnam? Or how about in Afghanistan, when they brought the entirety of mighty NATO to bear against the lightly armed Taliban for 20 years of brutality, only to flee the country with their tails between their legs as the Taliban swept back to power? Or how about their failure to quell the resistance in Iraq, which is alive and well today, or to destroy Hamas, which continues to substantially control a substantial part of the devastated Gaza Strip, notwithstanding 2+ years of genocide? Or how about their abject failure to stop the attacks, the solidarity attacks on Red Sea shipping by Ansar Allah during the course of this genocide? And of course, there is their failure to defeat the Islamic Republic in the 12-day war of last June, despite their best efforts to do so. There never was any basis to believe that they can win this war, and that too is something that we must not forget. Nor must we forget that there was never any legal justification for this war, a fact about which the corporate media has been studiously silent. Even if everything they say about Iran is true, and most of it is fabrication, it still would not provide a lawful justification for them to bomb and potentially even invade the country. This constitutes a frontal assault on the United Nations Charter, something that they don't want you to know, and something that they don't even want us to talk about. And finally, do not forget about the significance of the Epstein files, what those files say about the depravity of those who rule over us. What they show is that if anybody in the world today requires regime change, it's the West. If we can remember all of these things, and if we act upon these truths after the dust has settled from this criminal war, then just maybe we can emerge from this with a better world. As much as I want to avoid this war, it might ultimately prove to be our best opportunity to rid ourselves of this pestilence, this cancer, this plague upon humanity known as the billionaire class. And have no doubt that it is the billionaire class that is ultimately responsible for this war and for all the suffering that it will occasion. Finally, and for what it's worth, I humbly offer a few words of advice to our comrades in Iran. First, do not wait to close the Strait of Hormuz. The moment the bombs start falling upon your country, shut it down and keep it shut until the bombing has stopped. I say this because your best bet to bring a swift end to the aggression against your country is to make the peoples of the West feel the consequences of this war, even if only to a limited and strictly economic degree. Unless you do that, and this is the sad reality, then they are unlikely to impose upon Western politicians the pressure necessary to bring this war of aggression to an end. That is the pathetic state, I'm sad to say, of the anti-war movement in the West today. Just this past Sunday, an estimated 350,000 people took to the streets of a suburb of Toronto, Canada's largest city, to express their lust for this war. As was noted by media organizations around the country, many of these people displayed photographs of the Shah of Iran or his son, this abject vassal of Washington who has lived off the fruits stolen from his country by his father, the abject vassal of Washington who delights in the glory of his father's tyranny and sadistic oppression of the Iranian people. And to make matters worse, many of them, again, as noted by the Canadian media, displayed the flags of the genocidal Israeli entity of the United States and expressed solidarity with the war criminals Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. All of this was reported without a hint of irony, skepticism, or criticism of Canada's billionaire-controlled corporate media, which reveled in the show of significant public support for the coming war of aggression on the people of Iran. Let me say without any hesitation that anyone who supports what the Trump and Netanyahu regimes are doing to Iran and seek to do to Iran is an enemy not only of the Iranian people, but of all that is decent and good in this world. The fact that many of these demonstrators are themselves of Iranian origin does not change that fact one bit. Shame on them all for siding with the Epstein cabal, with the perpetrators of genocide and child rape. Meanwhile, where have the anti-war protests been during the past few weeks? I myself did not see a single one in the streets of Canadian cities. So I say it again to our comrades in Iran: if you want Western citizens to pressure their governments to end Western attacks on your country, then close the Strait of Hormuz and do it immediately. Second, make an example, I suggest, of at least one Gulf dictatorship. Bring so much destruction upon its head that the other Gulf dictatorships quake in fear at the thought of what you might do the next time a war of aggression is launched against you with their complicity and support. Personally, I recommend that you focus your energies on the United Arab Emirates. After all, the UAE is nothing but a pedophile Mossad operation masquerading as a country. Third, show no mercy to the rabid Israeli attack dog. Israelis excel at murdering babies and women, but they have no stomach for a real war, especially a war of attrition. Let them taste the suffering they've inflicted upon those who are powerless to defend themselves. And if by any chance you are minded to strike a civilian facility in retaliation for the inevitable attacks on your civilians, and I hope that you do not succumb to such a temptation, but if by any chance you experience such a temptation, I suggest you give consideration to leveling to the ground the Israeli Knesset and causing an earthquake in the psyche of the Israeli people. Nothing would do more damage to their sense of superiority than to see the Knesset lying in smoking ruins. Finally, and this is my most important advice to our friends in Iran, when the Israelis and the Americans come suing for peace, demand justice for the Palestinian people, because as long as they are not free, no one shall be free.